Why do we spend our entire lives trying to outrun the people who raised us, only to find their habits, their mistakes, and even their heartbreaks staring back at us in the mirror? We like to think of ourselves as self-made, especially in this modern age of the personal brand and the curated lifestyle. We want to believe we are the captains of our own souls. But what if we're actually just a remix of our parents' greatest failures? What if our personalities are just a collection of survival mechanisms we built to endure a childhood we didn't choose? In 1983, on a single, sweltering night in Malibu, 4 famous siblings threw a party. So legendary, it literally ended in flames. But the fire didn't start with a stray spark or a knocked-over candle. It had been smoldering for decades. Today, we're looking at Malibu Rising by Jenkins Reid. This isn't just a story about a wild party or the high-gloss lifestyle of the 80s. It's a surgical examination of how we inherit trauma, the crushing weight of being the strong one in a broken family, and that terrifying moment when you finally decide to let the past burn down so you can build something new on the ashes. Imagine you're standing on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. The water looks infinite, right? That's how the Riva children, Nina, Jay, Hud, and Kit, viewed their lives. They are the offspring of Mick Riva, a legendary crooner whose fame is matched only by his ability to abandon his family. Because their father was a ghost and their mother was consumed by heartbreak, the Riva siblings had to invent themselves from scratch. But here's the big idea. Jenkins Reid is pushing, there is no such thing as a clean slate. This book argues that we are built from the wreckage of those who came before us. Nina Riva, the eldest, has spent her life being the adult because her parents refused to be. She's a world-famous model and a powerhouse surfer. But her internal identity is entirely defined by her service to others. We see this play out in our own lives all the time. How many of us choose our careers, our partners, or even our hobbies as a direct reaction to what our parents did or didn't do? If they were broke, we might become obsessed with financial security. If they were chaotic, we might become rigid control freaks. Malibu Rising shows us that even when we think we're running away from our family history, we're often just running in a very tight circle. The Rivas are glamorous, wealthy, and beautiful, but they are all tethered to a man who didn't want them. This book forces us to ask a difficult question. Are you actually you? Or are you just a collection of reactions to your upbringing? If you're the oldest child, or the responsible one in your friend group, the character of Nina Riva is going to feel like a personal attack. She is what we call the load-bearing sibling. In architecture, if you remove a load-bearing wall, the whole house collapses. Nina has spent 20 years holding up the ceiling, so her siblings don't get crushed by the weight of their father's neglect. The big idea here is the hidden cost of self-sacrifice. In the book, Jenkins Reid highlights how Nina's identity has been swallowed whole by her roles. She is a sister, a provider, and a wife. But she isn't a person. When her husband leaves her at the start of the story, she doesn't even know how to be sad for herself because she's too busy worrying about the logistics of her annual party. This reflects a very real psychological phenomenon. When we take on the role of the fixer, we often lose our own North Star. We become so good at anticipating everyone else's needs that we go numb to our own. Malibu Rising challenges the idea that being the strong one is always a virtue. In reality, it can be a cage. By the time the party is in full swing, and the house is literally crawling with celebrities and strangers, we see Nina reaching a breaking point. It's a reminder that you can't keep a roof over everyone else's head if you're standing in the rain yourself. Now, let's talk about the man himself, Mick Riva. He is the sun that the entire plot orbits around, even when he's not on the page. In Malibu Rising, Mick represents the golden ghost, the parent whose absence is more powerful than someone else's presence. Taylor Jenkins Reid does something brilliant here by showing us Mick's perspective. We see how he justifies his abandonment. He isn't a cartoon villain. He's just a man who is addicted to the beginning of things. He loves the first spark of fame, the first month of a marriage, the first few years of fatherhood. But the moment things get difficult or require actual work, he vanishes. This brings us to a transformative realization. Talent does not equal character. We live in a culture that often forgives the great artist for being a terrible human. We think that because someone can sing a beautiful song or paint a masterpiece, they deserve a pass on their personal failures. This book deconstructs that myth. It shows how Mick's greatness was funded by the emotional bankruptcy of his children. The big idea is that we have to stop waiting for the person who hurt us to be the one to heal us. The Riva kids spend years waiting for Mick to acknowledge them, to apologize, and to finally be the father they deserve. But the climax of the book isn't about Mick finally changing. It's about the siblings realizing that his approval is a currency that has no value. The entire book builds toward the fire. Throughout the narrative, Taylor Jenkins Reid gives us timestamps leading up to the moment the Riva mansion goes up in flames. Usually, in literature, fire is a symbol of destruction and loss. But in this book, it's a symbol of mercy. There's a concept in forest ecology called serotiny, where certain seeds can only sprout after they've been exposed to the intense heat of a wildfire. That is exactly what happens in Malibu Rising. The party is a chaotic mess of ego, drugs, and 80s excess. It represents all the superficial layers the Rivas have built to hide their pain. When the house burns, it's not a tragedy. It's a clearance. The book suggests that sometimes the only way to move forward is to let the structures of your old life be completely leveled. You can't renovate a foundation that was built on secrets and abandonment. You have to let it turn to ash so you can see the land for what it actually is. It's a powerful metaphor for anyone who feels stuck in a cycle. Sometimes fixing things isn't the answer. Sometimes you have to let the fire happen. Now, let's get into the critique. Where does Malibu Rising land in the grand scheme of contemporary fiction? Taylor Jenkins Reid is a master of atmosphere. She creates worlds that feel like high-definition movies. The 80s setting is lush. The surfing descriptions are visceral, and the pacing is relentless. However, some might find the party half of the book a bit crowded. There are dozens of minor characters introduced during the party scenes. Celebrities, hangers-on, random guests, and while they add to the feeling of chaos, they can sometimes dilute the emotional core of the four siblings. If you're looking for a deep philosophical treatise, this might feel a bit like a beach read. But I would argue that this surface-level glitz is intentional. The superficiality of the guests serves as a foil to the raw, deep-seated trauma of the Rivas. My main critique is that the ending feels a bit tidier than real life usually is. In reality, letting go of generational trauma usually takes years of therapy and backsliding, not just one night and a fire. But for the sake of a transformative narrative, it works. It's a heightened, cinematic version of the truth. So who is Malibu Rising for? If you are someone who feels the weight of family expectations, or if you've ever felt like you're the only adult in the room, this book will speak to you. It's for the people who are tired of being the strong ones. Personally, I think this is one of Taylor Jenkins Reid's most accessible works because it taps into a universal truth. We all have a house that needs to burn down. Whether it's a toxic relationship, a career we chose for the wrong reasons, or a version of ourselves we created to please our parents. We all have something that is holding us back from the ocean. Here is your actionable step for today. Inspired by Nina Riva's journey. Identify one load-bearing responsibility you've taken on that isn't actually yours to carry. Maybe it's managing a parent's emotions, fixing a friend's constant drama, or keeping a secret that isn't yours to keep. Once you've identified it, I want you to metaphorically set a fire. Stop managing it. Let the person responsible for that burden feel its weight. It's going to feel uncomfortable, and it might feel like things are falling apart. But remember, you can't build your own house while you're busy holding up someone else's ceiling. Malibu Rising reminds us that our past is a part of us, but it doesn't have to be the boss of us. We can acknowledge where we came from, thank the people who tried their best, and then walk away from the flames toward a version of ourselves that we actually chose. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the Riva family's legendary night, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive.